Hello, and welcome to Talking Turkey. I'm your host, Ahval editor David Lepeska, and with me today is John Dündar, former editor-in-chief of Cumhuriyet newspaper and recipient of the 2016 International Press Freedom Award from the Committee to Protect Journalists. Hello, John, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, I thank you, David.
I'd like to begin with your story of exile, if that's okay, because in certain ways it's a reflection of Turkey's story in recent years. The troubles began for you, as they did for many, around the time of the Gezi protests in mid-2013. You were laid off from Milliyet newspaper soon after the protests because columns of yours that were apparently too critical of the government. What do you remember of that time?
That's true. They didn't like my articles at that time. And the Gezi protest, I guess, was the turning point for Turkey, not only for me. And from then on, Erdogan realized the threats against himself and tried to smash all the opposition. And I was one of them. So I was taking part in the Gezi protest. I was there as a journalist, as a citizen, as a father. So, of course, I reflected in my column what I witnessed, but they didn't like it. And at that stage, once they want me to stop writing for the paper for a while, and then they send me to Egypt, to keep me away from the hot issue. But Egypt was also another hot issue, and they didn't like my columns this time writing about Egypt, and they said you'd better not to write for a while. And I waited for a while, and I got a call from the new boss of Milliyet, which was Demirören. He's now one of the biggest media moguls in Turkey, and he said, unfortunately, we can't go on with you. So I knew it. I was waiting for this, and he didn't say anything else. But I knew that he was under pressure by the government. And then, unfortunately, I had to leave Milliyet at that stage.
Mm-hmm. You moved on to Cumhuriyet and in early 2015 became editor-in-chief there. A few months later, you stumbled on a huge story. Trucks from Turkey's National Intelligence Agency, MIT, ferrying weapons over the border to Syria, possibly to ISIS. Tell us how you came across that story and what was your immediate reaction?
Well, to be honest, before I was appointed as the editor-in-chief, I made this story on Erdogan's corruption case. So I guess it all started with Gezi, and then this new serial was disturbing for the government as well. So now everybody remembers the news story about the MIT trucks, but before then, it was a huge story about Erdogan's corruption case, and I was sued by the government because of it. And Erdogan was who he accused me for, for insulting the president, of course. And then I'm not sure. Yeah, I got a sentence out of it, and in the end, so it was before it. Then I was appointed as the editor-in-chief, and a couple of months later, we published that story, which was a true story, depending on the real material, video material. Of course, they didn't like it, and the other day he accused me for releasing the state secrets, and he said I would pay a price for it, and since then I've been paying it.
Right. As I understand it, the Cumhuriyet editorial team decided to run the MIT trucks piece with everyone's name on it in the hope of avoiding government persecution. But you decided not to put your colleagues in danger and ran the story with only your name. And now, as you say, you've been since paying the price. So if you had the chance to do it over, would you have handled the MIT truck story any differently?
Not at all. It was a gesture by the editorial team, of course. They said we should, face the possible risks together. I could understand this, of course, and I appreciated it. But of course, as an editor-in-chief or as a journalist, I should, I couldn't do it. So I said, no, of course. I mean, I should take the risk in that sense, as the story is mine and I am the editor-in-chief, etc. And then I published the story by myself. But then all the editorial team and all the writers of the paper signed their, put their names on the story the other day after Erdoğan's threatened myself and our Ankara correspondent. Then it has become a fight between the paper and the presidency. But of course, I wouldn't. If it's today, I would do the same, of course, because it was kind of a responsibility of a journalist to release that dirty secret of the state.
You and Ankara bureau chief Erdem Gül were later arrested and charged with espionage and membership in a terror group and spent something like 90 days in prison. And then a few months after your release from prison, you were leaving Istanbul's main courthouse with your wife when a man emerged from the crowd with a gun. Please tell me what you recall from that encounter.
It was I remember someone approaching myself. I hadn't seen the gun in the beginning, but I heard a voice of him calling me a traitor, and then he shot twice. Then I remember the smell of it. Then someone, a friend of mine, a journalist, another colleague who was wounded, he said, "Run, you are the target." And he was trying to protect me, and he was wounded. And I didn't realize that my wife was struggling with him at that stage. And then all of a sudden, I turned back and I saw him surrounded by the other civilian police. And what was strange about this was it was the most protected place in Istanbul. It's the place. So Çağlayan is very famous in Turkey, of course, for all of us, and it's almost impossible to get in. And he succeeded to get in with a gun, and waited me for a while there. So that was the strange thing. Another strange thing was I was under protection at that stage. A police protection was given to me, and at that very morning, I got a call from this guy, and he said he couldn't come. And in fact, my driver told me that he fell asleep and couldn't come that day.
Wow.
And normally every day he came with the driver and took me from home and brought me to wherever I go. And the only day he was not there was that day. And I said to him, we can meet at the courthouse. So we did. And then when I was leaving the courthouse, he was not with me. And my wife later on said that he was just, playing with his cellular phone. And I was alone at that stage. So I don't want to accuse anyone, but it was a bit strange, of course.
It seems rather suspicious. Yeah.
It is, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, normally he must be the one who should have protected me, but he was not there.
The same day, I think the court sentenced you to nearly 6 years in prison for leaking state secrets. You appealed the decision, and if I have this right, decided to spend some time in Spain with your wife. While you were there, of course, the Erdogan government fended off a bloody coup attempt. Now, you decided not to return to Turkey and instead relocated to Germany. How difficult was that decision, and what convinced you to do that? Was this assassination attempt? Was it these charges from the government? What convinced you to make that choice?
To be honest, it was not my decision. My decision was to go directly back that day because I couldn't stay there anymore, write a book while the country is under turmoil. So I decided to go right away at that day. But then I talked to my lawyers, and they said the situation is dramatically changed. Why they wait for a while? And my wife also said so. So I waited for a couple of days, and then they told me that after the 20th, in fact, the kind of counter revolution by by Erdogan, counter coup, let's say, they said the situation is completely changed and there's no rule of law anymore, so we can't protect you legally or physically. And if you are in jail, of course, I mean, if you come back, you'll be in jail. But not only this, but your life is under risk. So they
Well, but
convinced
that
me
was
to.
the case before then. Your life was clearly at risk. You were being attacked. You were being sent, handed charges. And you could, of course, defy your lawyers. So, I mean, why didn't you just go back? Like, what convinced you that it was time
But
not
can
to?
you imagine that they released the attacker, the gunman, just
Uh,
after me?
uh,
It was a clear sign that he was awarded. Uh, so then, the prison. There was a list of journalists at that stage to be arrested, and my name was in the first line.
mhm.
So of course I could have gone back and went to prison, but this time I was not sure if the prisons will be safe enough for me after they released the attacker. They awarded the attacker, and he didn't get any punishment out of it. I mean, imagine that he tried to kill a journalist, or at least wanted a journalist, and
In public, in front of
in
everybody.
public, in public, and he stayed something like couple of I don't remember now, but couple of weeks in jail, and they released him and they gave his passport back. So it was a clear sign of the that there'll be no punishment if someone attacks you. Um, so
Mhm.
I decided to wait for a while more, and I've been still waiting.
But Turkey issued a warrant for your arrest in October 2016, I believe it was. And by then, the Turkish government had begun seeing just about every critic as an enemy of the state. Your wife had her passport taken away, and she was unable to leave Turkey to visit you or your son, who's in London. She was finally able to join you last June. If you could please tell me about your time apart and how she was finally able to leave Turkey. I read that you had to communicate via secret back channels and use code words.
Yeah, it was not easy to communicate with her because we knew that the big brother was listening, and it was 3.5 years we separated, and we tried every way to get her passport back. And we tried legal ways, political ways, diplomatic channels. Didn't work. So she released a video explaining her situation. There was no accusations against her, um, and it was just for being my wife. And it's against all the national and international laws. And it has become an issue between Germany and Turkey, and in the in official talks, it has come to the negotiation table. I knew, as far as I know, so it didn't work, and Erdogan and his government decided to keep her as a you know, just to punish me, and she was as a hostage. And then in the end, we decided, because she was suffering and she was missing her family, her son, her husband, and then she decided to do it illegally, and as many others, unfortunately. And of course, it was not possible to communicate with each other about this issue. So yeah, of course, I didn't know the whole details at that stage, how she
Mm.
would do it. And then she managed to come somewhere, and I went there and took her. Uh, we met in Greece, and then we came back to Germany together.
So now you're together in exile. You've been in Berlin about 3.5 years, I think, and now she's
That's
been
right.
here, I guess 6, 7 months she's been here. What do you and your wife miss most about Turkey?
Well, in fact, we are missing Turkey laughing, and the country is not laughing anymore, unfortunately. So, I mean, it's a sad country now, suffering a lot. And that's why, I mean, the most, I miss more the country who is happy, and unfortunately, my country is not happy anymore. That's why I, I missed its laughing most.
Hmm.
And I hate to see my country suffering in sadness.
Yeah, sure. Speaking of suffering, you've received death threats during your time in exile, and last month you wrote an article for the Washington Post detailing how Turkey might be plotting to assassinate dissidents abroad. You pointed to Germany as the most likely place because of the presence of so many supposed enemies, including thousands of Gulenists who fled Turkey after the coup attempt. I wonder what inspired that piece. Had you heard something about being targeted yourself?
Well, it was not my information, but a parliamentarian got in the parliament, uh, made a speech about this, and he said some dissidents in exile were under threat, and there's a huge risk about them. And I guess his speech was depending on some information he got and shared with the German authorities. And just after this speech, I was, taken under protection by the German authorities, and for a while I stayed so. And then I've learned that there's a kind of real risk about us, um, and some people were, some people came to Germany just to do some dirty work here, and the German authorities got this information and tried to protect us, not only me, but a couple of more people whom I know. And then we realized that the threat of Erdogan in the first day was still, valid, and he's trying to punish his opponents wherever they are. That's why, I mean, the risk is still there. I mean, not you are in jail, you are in the country, you are outside the country. Doesn't matter. If you are challenging to such a leader and such a regime, they want you to feel always under risk.
Yeah, I mean, for example, we're talking on Tuesday, January 14th, and a trial against you is set to begin in Turkey this Friday, the 17th. Do you even know which charge this is for? And will you have a lawyer there? Are you mounting a defense for this case?
Which case you are talking about? Because I
There's
have
a case
several of.
against you that's resuming on Friday. Maybe you don't even know about it.
Yeah. Because I got something like 11, 12 cases, so I don't know which one is you're talking about.
Right.
Because after I left, they try to put everything on me, and it's okay, no problem with this. So I have really a lot of cases. So it's not only MIT trucks or Cumhuriyet case. I've got something like a Gülen case because I was for one day supporting action, as I have appointed myself as the editor in chief just to show solidarity. So this is another one, and Erdogan corruption case, and lastly, the Gezi protest case. So I one of the members of so-called Gezi organization, and I was accused of being a member. And together with them, we are also. Oh yeah, the case is still going on.
John,
So
you've
I'm
done
not.
you've done so many horrible things.
Yeah, yeah. So
What?
if you are branded as the enemy of the state, so it's easy for them to put every blame on you. So that's the case, unfortunately. And since there's no rule of law, I lost my interest about the cases in Turkey. Of course, my lawyers taking care of them, but I'm not. It's impossible for me to follow them closely.
Yeah. You said they tried to put everything on you. Yeah, I mean, I was wondering, so you haven't set foot in Turkey for years, but you're still a subject of great concern mainly in the pro-government media, a feared enemy of the state. How do you deal with the almost daily attacks in Turkish media? And maybe more importantly, how does it all affect your family back in Turkey?
By ignoring them. I mean, that's the only way, really. I mean, and that's the most powerful way because they want polemic. They want to fight with me, and you can't imagine how much energy you need to cope with it. So at one stage, I decided not to, take care of them, and then I decided to ignore them, and that's the kind of punishment for them because being ignored is a kind of they lost their power in that sense, and I advise my family to do the same, and I don't give any reply to them. I don't read them at all, and then I have a happy life now without them. And my principle is I only care the critics of the people that I care. So this principle makes me happy.
Speaking of Turkish exiles who face regular attacks in the media, I wondered what you think of Gulenists and the Gulen network today. Of course, a handful of them, it seems likely, played key roles in a bloody coup attempt and should face justice. But I think it's reasonable to assume that the vast majority of Gulenists had no idea about the coup plot. For years, of course, thousands of them worked within Turkey's government and security infrastructure because Gulen and Erdogan were allies. Countless other Gulenists were increasing Turkey's soft power by opening largely successful schools all over the world. Now that's all ended, of course, and Turkey is still arresting alleged Gulenists almost daily, 3.5 years later. Just today, I read that Hakan Şükür, likely Turkey's best ever footballer, is now an Uber driver in the United States. So
Yeah.
I was wondering, how do you think a more democratic Turkish government might have dealt with Gulenists after the failed coup?
Well, I guess they need a self-criticism at that stage, which we don't have it yet. So I really don't know what's going on inside the circles, but what I see so far is that Erdogan smashed the whole organization, which they've been, together for years, and they created their power together, each other's power, and we haven't heard anything from Gülen himself about, I mean, what was going on, what had happened, what was wrong and what was right, etc. So I mean, if it's such a powerful organization, there must be a self-criticism about themselves. And now they are defending the principles we've been defending for years, and they seems to realize the danger of Erdogan, and Erdogan seems to understand what we've been saying him for years about the danger of Gülen, etc. And for us means the people who were against the Gülenists and Erdogan at the same time. It's a funny story, really. I mean, they just realized the danger of each other, which we've been aware of for years. And that's the situation now. And I mean, I can only give you an example.
I mean, I guess. Well, but quick question before you give an example. I guess do you sympathize a bit more with the Gulenists because of how it's all played out, or are they getting their just punishment?
I don't want to generalize.
Okay.
I mean, if you categorically do this, I shared the same prison with some of them. I saw them. I mean, some of them have done nothing but just simple believers.
Sure.
And I saw their families suffering, and I feel sympathy for some of them, and I hate some of them. So I don't want to say something categorically.
Sure.
It's the same with the AKP people. I know that some of them really criminals, and some of them really true believers, and some of them searching for their interests, nothing else, just money, something like this. So, our main fault is categorically take some movements and people. So I don't want to get this trap. But for the Gulenists, if they can do some kind of self-criticism at that stage, I'm sure for this, they from now on, if they would stay as an organization, whatever you call it, they need, that self-criticism, and then we can negotiate with them, what went wrong, and from now on, where will their position in political and social life of Turkey, etc. But for the moment, what I see is a total retreat, and they don't know what to do. And the legend about their power is, disappeared all of a sudden. And most of them are, as you said, either jobless or join the governments because of the magnet of power, maybe. And some of them maybe criticizing the whole movement, but they are not so vocal at that stage, as far as I see.
It seems like you're essentially saying that until the Gulen organization admits that it made some mistakes, it's not going to be seen as a legitimate organization in Turkey.
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay.
To be honest, yeah, I was not so familiar with the movement, and I was always at the critical standpoint, and we were trying to warn the government about these dangers. And at that stage, they were accusing us for, criticizing the Gulenists. And it's funny that now they are the ministers and we are the exiles.
Okay, just a few more questions for you. A German theater company near Dortmund recently mounted a play based on your book, Traitor. I think this is the second of your works to be turned into a live drama. A play based on your book, We Are Arrested, was produced in England a few years ago.
That's right.
I wonder what you thought of this new German play, and how does it feel to have your life displayed so publicly like that on stage?
Strange, really strange, very strange feeling. And me and my wife last week were there to watch the play. In fact, I watched it several times, but for the first time with my wife. And you know what? It was in German. Unfortunately, our German is not that good at the moment. And we were crying to ourselves on the stage without understanding a word. And yeah, I mean, while you are in a fight, you can't feel the pain, and or sorrow or the sadness, whatever, because you are in a fight. It's like, I mean, in a war, if you're wounded, you don't feel the pain, but afterwards you start bleeding, and you realize that, oh, there's a wound in your body. So it's like this, in the fight, we didn't realize how difficult all we've been living through was. But on the stage for an hour, 1.5 hours, watching all this troubled years in a play, it was tough. And then we realized that, oh wow, yeah, it was really a bit more, a lot for a couple, and for a family. But knowing that it's not only our story, and thousands of families have been living under these circumstances, even worse. And at least we are together at last. But for many, it's still a dream to come together, and that's why we feel lucky. And but of course, it was a strange feeling, and it was a bit sad.
A few last questions about Turkish politics. You're a believer in that Turkish political saying that whoever loses Istanbul loses Turkey. Erdogan's AKP famously lost Istanbul not once but twice last year to main opposition candidate Ekrem İmamoğlu. Before we get to Erdogan's potential future, how do you think İmamoğlu is doing so far? Not just as Istanbul mayor, but as a potential rival to Erdogan. He's been regularly challenging Erdogan in public, most recently about this proposed canal, Istanbul.
So far, so good. I guess Erdogan realized that İmamoğlu is representing Erdogan's early years in Istanbul municipality. So that's why he's so scared, because he knows very well the end of the story. So there's a huge similarity between the two. So he starts the climbing in his political career by winning Istanbul municipality, Erdogan. And then he challenged his party, and he has become the prime minister first and the president. So there are a lot of similarities, and that's why he wants to stop this climb of İmamoğlu. But he's clever enough to deal with this challenge, and İmamoğlu is really doing very well so far. And Turkey, I guess, is fed up with this aggression, and it needs peace. And İmamoğlu realized this, and he represents the peace. That's why if Erdogan insists on this chaos strategy, I guess he would be helping İmamoğlu being more popular. And if he wouldn't get into this trap, I guess he has a real chance to challenge Erdogan in the next presidential elections.
Well, speaking of which, you've said more than once that you hope to return to Turkey this year, but Turkey has no election scheduled until November 2023, which is, of course, the country's centennial. Some people are expecting Erdogan to call early elections, but I look at it and I expect Erdogan to do everything in his power to still be in power at the centennial. What do you think?
Yeah, he may want to get in early elections just to stay in power. So just to remind you that in the last 10 years or so, Turkey haven't had any year without elections, maybe one or two. So we love to go to polls. And the government, even local, general, presidential, or referendums, we've been going to polls for every year almost. So, and really Turkish politics is full of surprises. So why I'm guessing this is that there are two parties coming to the political area, and for the first time within
The
AKP
and Babacan parties, yes.
and Babacan parties, and he will be facing with opposition from his old friends, and we don't know the impact of this on Turkish politics yet. So it will be a surprising. I mean, those two will be surprising actors of Turkish politics now. And the rising of İmamoğlu and losing Istanbul, there are really a lot of signs that the government doesn't feel itself in safety. That's why you never know, either this year or next year. But I'm really hoping and expecting an early election in the Turkey's future.
You're saying the idea would be to kind of head off İmamoğlu and then Davutoğlu and Babacan parties, kind of giving them time to gain momentum.
Well, for example, the AKP parliamentarians, nobody knows their names or their tendencies. They are in this party because the party is in power. And if they feel that the party is, not that powerful anymore, and the power is shifting to somewhere, you never know what they do. I mean, if they, starts having question marks about their president or they will stick to them. You never know. So the most important thing is the balance of powers in the coming future. So we'll see. But I'm really optimistic that Turkey would have many surprises in the coming months and years.
Okay, last question for you. You recently gave a TED talk or a TEDx talk on defending people's right to know. You argue that democracy is a rose garden and we are the gardeners. I wasn't sure if this we referred to journalists or to all democratic citizens, but either way, it seems like Turkey is a bit short on gardeners these days.
That's right.
I'm wondering, what do you think would help bring Turkey's roses back to life? Is it only getting rid of Erdogan or something else maybe as well?
The problem about Turkey is that the pressure over people is so high that people really scared to be vocal, and you are talking about the silence most probably about the gardeners. But imagine that this country in 2013 witnessed something like a Gezi Park protest. It was the biggest involved in Turkey's history. So millions of people were on the streets challenging the government, and all of a sudden they disappeared. But they are still there. You know, this resistance is still there, but they are so. Unfortunately, it was smashed by the brutally by the government, and if you block the democratic channels in a country like Turkey, you never know what would happen. Nobody was expecting something like Gezi Park protests in 2013, and nobody was expecting anything like a coup attempt from the army in Turkey. So those are the anti-democratic kind of channels, because the democratic channels are closed. So that's why it's really hard to guess what's coming next. And I hope the government realizes and open the gates for a democratic change. Otherwise, it would be very harmful, not only for them, but for the country as well.
Interesting that we began and ended with the Gezi protest, and maybe telling as well.
Yeah,
John Dündar, thank you so much for your time and insight.
I thank you very much.